Welcome to the film analysis. Today with All Quiet on the Western Front by Edward Berger. Perhaps the most famous anti-war novel has been adapted to a film for the third time. Milestone directed the first adaptation in 1930, a masterpiece providing a quasi-documentary version of war's horror. The director served in the photo department of the US Army during World War I. He applied his experience to the film. D'Albert Mann's film version of Erich Maria Remarque's novel was released in 1979, but its images never attained the first adaptation's impressiveness, the former bearing resemblance to television. It fares well, but if you know the first adaptation, one may dispose of the second. Now, a third film adaptation. Breathe a sigh of relief. It will from now on stand on equal footing with the one from 1930. The fear of the remake could hardly have been greater. It remains, after all, a German production, a Netflix film at that. Some theaters already showed All Quiet on the Western Front. It certainly belongs on the big screen. Netflix will contribute to its international success. This film appears at the right moment. Would this film still be produced today? Doubtful, as it radically promotes pacifism. As of now, we experience quite the frivolous approach to war and peace driven by Twitter moralism and the questionable certainty this time everything will be different. Many are happy to cheer on warmongering. This war can truly be won. And Morelli characterized this problem already in her Basic Principles of War Propaganda, how the old lies just keep appearing in new guises. That's what we experience in the adaptation. People suggested to World War I to be the last one, bringing justice. A teacher gives a great speech, toughening up young men, sacrificing them for a higher principle, drawing parallels to today. High school graduates fall for it, just as many intellectuals fell for it in 1914, even advertising for the war. Paul Bäumer and his classmates must head to the Western Front. They look forward to the adventure but realize their misconception at the first attack. They didn't remotely understand war's true meaning. What does this film want? The answer is very simple. It wants to show what war means, and it succeeds, pushing the limits of the medium. How close can we bring the war to those who are sitting comfortably in the cinema, perhaps enjoying a Coke and seeing only the images? Those who hear the shock but do not experience it in their own bodies. This film takes us close. An old thesis proposes that anti-war films as cinema are always double-edged. One could depict the horrors of war, but at the same time heavy weapons and battles fascinated and affected the audience, even in an anti-war film. I beg to differ. There are many good anti-war films, with All Quiet on the Western Front being another good one. At no point does All Quiet on the Western Front fascinate. Even if the images are impressive and imposing, they never promote war or convey beauty. All Quiet on the Western Front is still an important, timeless novel. War still makes soldiers sacrifice themselves for the interests of a state and shoot at the supposed enemy comrades. But let's admit it. This novel has weaknesses. This novel is important, but frankly, Erich Maria Remarque did not always succeed in creating a stylistic masterpiece. Some descriptions of landscapes drift into kitsch. But where Remarque remains matter of fact, he shatters line after line. Both the first film adaptation and the third one depict landscapes excluding kitsch and sentimentality. In the third film, director Berger doesn't operate with Remarque's kitsch, contributing to its message heavily. In this regard, the first and third film adaptations fare better than Remarque's novel, although one should have received both. Remarque's dialogues are unpretentious and bear witness to immense genius. They strike to the core. For example, when the simple-minded comrades try to come to an understanding about the meaning of war. State, state, Tjaden snaps his fingers contemptuously. Gendarmes, police, taxes, that's your state. If that's what you are talking about, no, thank you. That's right, says Kat. You've said something for once, Tjaden. State and home country, there's a big difference. But they go together, insists Kropp. Without the state, there wouldn't be any home country. True, but just you consider almost all of us are simple folk. And in France too, the majority of men are laborers, workmen or poor clerks. Now just why would a French blacksmith or a French shoemaker want to attack us? No, it is merely the rulers. I had never seen a Frenchman before I came here, and it will be just the same with the majority of Frenchmen as regards us. They weren't asked about it any more than we were. Another particularly poignant scene unfolds when the soldiers in the trenches remember school, stating, "What do you mean by the threefold theme in William Tell?" says Kropp reminiscently and roars with laughter. What was the purpose of the Poetic League of Göttingen, asks Müller suddenly and earnestly. How many children had Charles the Bald? I interrupt gently. You'll never make anything of your life, Bäumer, croaks Müller. How do you expect to succeed in life if you don't know that? I ask Albert hotly, which he caps with, what is meant by cohesion? We remember mighty little of all that rubbish. Anyway, it has never been the slightest use to us. At school, nobody ever taught us how to light a cigarette in a storm of rain, nor how a fire could be made with wet wood, nor that it is best to stick a bayonet in the belly because there it doesn't get jammed as it does in the ribs. These dialogues underline war renders everything null and void. Illustrated by dialogues, impressive images, some reminiscent of Otto Dix. He created the famous triptych The War, containing grey, blue, greenish colors, which we recognize in the film Earth, Mud, Ammunition, and in it the human being, often pale as chalk. The film begins with the camera looking up from the ground. The forest is shrouded in silence. The tops of the fir trees do not move. A change of perspective sets in. The camera looks down on the battlefield from above. Paul Bäumer and his comrades, their high school diplomas in their pockets, the world at their feet in peacetime, now shooting their way to France. Filled with anticipation, awaiting our first Frenchman, but soon we see its true meaning. Group dynamics drive them to war. Their teacher rants about the threshold of existence. Paul Bäumer belongs to one of many, as the film makes clear. When Paul Bäumer receives his uniform, his boots, suddenly he sees a label with a different name. When he asks, he is told the equipment has been returned. But we are wiser than Paul Bäumer. We see the path that these boots and jacket have taken, Paul Bäumer replacing a fallen soldier. These scenes illustrate the essence of war. Regarding war, there is plenty of talk of dehumanization, often meaning disinhibition. But a brutal war is nothing short of a pleonasm. Are we aware of any tender wars where dying on the field becomes a pleasant affair? Liberals nowadays suggest military to be woke and defensible, justifying armament, but what is that supposed to mean? They suggest gender stars and tank howitzers to be the same thing. Existentialism prevails, however, and in the end, it's man against man, and if necessary, the opponent is beaten with a folding spade until he doesn't move anymore. Of course, we see disinhibition spirals thrown back like a fish thrown ashore. A soldier wheezes until he chokes on his blood. Drastic scenes, but never do these images possess anything sensationalist. Unlike Remarque, director Edward Berger chooses to show the negotiation of the armistice between Germany and France. Matthias Erzberger plays a crucial role here, played very convincingly by Daniel Brühl. During the negotiations, Erzberger repeats again and again that tens of thousands of young men were dying every day. War had to be stopped. The images contrast. We see people in fine threads, diplomats, negotiators, military men being rather upset about a half-baked croissant, while 40,000 people die every day at the end of the war in November 1918, thanks to these gentlemen who are yet to agree. These diplomatic conversations enrich the film. Erzberger is all about the people, but everyone else is not. We keep hearing, we fight for the people, we must do this to save the people and so on, but it's not true. In fact, two hostile states carry out their interest with the conflict. David Striso plays General Friedrich, still convinced to fight on and wait a few more months. After all, in a few months the new cohort will follow and the next Paul Bäumers will be worn out. Wickedly, but very true, Henry Kissinger once said, "He who strives for values shouldn't enter diplomatic service, but rather aspire to priesthood." After a few months, the new cohort moves up. That's how long you want to wait, and General Friedrich will want to fight to the last man. But he himself pulls out of everything. Heavy weapons. We are witnessing a material battle, and man stands lost in the middle of it. The latest technology allows for a new realism, and cinematographer James Friend succeeds. The film pursues a high-resolution realism, refusing any quasi-documentary images. Friend arranges the images with virtuosity without stylizing. We don't end up seeing paintings. James Friend plays with the perspective. For example, we see how tanks suddenly start rolling in, giant tanks, virtually overrunning movie theaters. Friend works with long shots and close-ups. We may never settle down anywhere safely. That too is the essence of war. Incidentally, Friend exercises shots with calm and precision. Only a few surprise attacks disorientate. The war never degenerates into a spectacle of 1,000 cuts, being characterized by a great slowness. Parallels of Sam Mendes' 1917 come to mind. Both films attempt to explore film as a possibility of experience. We currently witness the snowflake generation cheering the militarization of society and celebrating dancing soldiers on TikTok. In the film, however, the camera calmly follows the landscape and it looks closely, providing important counter-images. The acoustics complement the scenery, screams of burning people, soldiers being shot or run over. These other images depict war's true nature. In one scene, two enemy soldiers lie next to each other, human brothers, but the logic of war demands one must kill the other. The historical context is irrelevant. Some criticize Remarque for naturalizing war. That's not true. He doesn't suppose war to be existential and continuous. Rather, he emphasizes its pointlessness. A war is not a fact of nature, but once wars start, they unfold their quasi-nature. Wars resemble each other. We are currently experiencing a discourse of heroism. Hollywood action films conserved heroism and trained people to sacrifice themselves. Having just said in the cinema, people are now adapting what they have seen for realpolitik. Perhaps these casual conclusions prove to be short-sighted. Similarly, one could argue computer games brutalize society. One must be cautious about hasty judgments. For sure, such a film promotes anti-heroism precisely because these young men initially try to be heroic. There is no heroism at all in war to that extent. All Quiet on the Western Front administers us an antidote to all the heroic deaths we still see in cinema. The film takes us as close to war as possible. Everything else is left to us and our reflection. We understand it and don't even have to trace it ourselves on a battlefield of this world. Felix Kammerer plays Paul Bäumer magnificently. Through his subtle play, we witness the horror of war and recognize the horror in his eyes, in identification via seeing. Usually, identification works by emotionally targeting the audience, making us sympathize with a person as he or she has grown close to our hearts due to a maudlin backstory, for example. But this film stresses the interchangeability from the beginning through the uniform. It could also be another Paul Bäumer. In war, man is only material. He is not allowed to be an individual. This is a difficulty for the war film genre. How do you show the universality of war when you always center characters? You can't look at everything from a bird's eye view as a strategy game as you might present it in a television audience on the news, illustrating an exchange of fire. You must get close to the protagonist without individualizing, not rendering the universal specific, but emphasizing the universal again and again. Therefore, an actor like Felix Kammerer is of need. He doesn't load his role with the specific. He may be an individual, but in war he is no longer. His gaze and ours overlap. We no longer simply watch, but see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.